The Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail is a 2,000-mile historic east, west, north, south, large-wheeled wagon route, an immigrant trail that connected the Missouri River to the valleys in Oregon. The eastern part of the Oregon Trail spanned part of the future state of Kansas and nearly all of what are now the states of Nebraska and Wyoming. The western half of the trail spanned most of the future states of Idaho and Oregon. The beginnings of the Oregon Trail were laid by fur trappers and traders from about 1811 to 1840 and were only passable on foot or by horseback. By 1836, when the first migrant wagon train was organized in Independence, Indiana, a wagon trail had been cleared to Fort Hall. Wagon trains were cleared further and further west, eventually reaching all the way to the valley in Oregon. What became called the Oregon Trail was complete even as improved roads, cutouts, ferries, and bridges made the trip faster and safer almost every year. From various points in Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska territory, the routes converged along the lower Platte River Valley near Fort Kinney, Nebraska territory, and led to rich farmlands west of the Rockies. From the mid-1830s and particularly through the 1846 through the 1869, the Oregon Trail and many offshoots were used by 400,000 settlers, ranchers, farmers, miners, and businessmen and their families. The eastern half of the trail was also used by travelers on the California Trail, Bozeman Trail, and Mormon Trail, which used of the same eastern trails before turning off to a separate destination. Use of the trail declined as the first transatlantic railroad was completed in 1869, making the trip west much faster. The Great Migration of 1843, or the wagon trains of 1843, an estimate 700 to 1,000 immigrants left for Oregon. They were led initially by John Grant, a former U.S. captain and fur trader who was contracted to guide the train to Fort Hall for $1 per person. Food was an important thing on the trip. The recommended amount of food per adult was 150 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of cornmeal, 50 pounds of bacon, 40 pounds of sugar, 10 pounds of coffee, 15 pounds of dried fruit, 5 pounds of salt, half pound of baking soda, 2 pounds of tea, 5 pounds of rice, and 15 pounds of beans. Now these provisions were usually kept in a watertight container to prevent spoilage. Usually meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner contained bacon, beans, and coffee with biscuits or bread. The typical cost of food for 4 people for 6 months was about $150. Now this food, you need a lot less if you had beef cattle you were going to take along for a food supply. Prior to the 1870s, there were vast herds of buffalo in Nebraska, which provided fresh meat and jerky for the trip so that they didn't have to fully rely on their beans, bacon, and bread. Although wild game was not consistently available product because sometimes the animals didn't want to be hunted and ran away. Cooking along the trail was done over a campfire. These were often fueled by wood, buffalo chips, willow, or sagebrush. Flint was used to start the fires. Now, this is how they would make their bacon and all their food, which was necessity to them. And now there was one important factor that we haven't gone over. That is the encounter of Native Americans. Now, when most people think of the encounters with Native Americans on the Oregon Trail, most of them think of them as negative or having lots of battles. Well, actually, most of the encounters with Native Americans were simple business transactions. immigrants offered clothes, tobacco, or rifles in exchange for Native American horses or food. Within a few years, the immigrants had overgrazed the prairie grasses, burned all the available firewood, and depleted the buffalo. Soon many tribes along the Platte were impoverished, all because they were willing to help the white man get to Oregon. They did not treat the Native Americans' lands with respect. The immigrants worried very much about the possibility of Native American attacks, but few ever happened. We're going to go over a few of them today. The Grattan Massacre, perhaps the most important confrontation with the Native American tribes, occurred near Fort Laramie in 1854 and became known as the Grattan Massacre. It began innocently enough. A single cow wandered away from the immigrants' wagon train. When the cow showed up at a nearby Sioux village, the tribe promptly ate it, and aggressive Lieutenant Grant and 28 men left for Fort Laramie with a single objective: punish the Sioux. The Sioux recognized their error and offered a horse in return for the cow, but Grant wasn't interested. He ordered his men to fire on the tribe. The Sioux chief told his warriors to withhold retaliation. Grant fired again and killed the chief. Strikes and counterstrikes escalated into all-out war. The battles continued for decades. Then there was the Massacre Rocks incident. For years, the Hudson Bay Company had been an establishing force on the Native Americans who lived near the Snake River. But when the British Fur Trading Company pulled out in the early 1850s, attacks on immigrants increased substantially. The best-known incident happened near Massacre Rocks in what is now southern Idaho on August 9, 1862. The attack came without warning. Within minutes, 5 immigrants were dead. The next morning, the immigrants regrouped and fought back. Immigrant John Hiltman said this about this: 30 men went in pursuit of the Indians and found them 7 miles distant. At first fire from the Indians, 2/3 of the men turned and ran. In the ensuing battle, 4 immigrants were killed. After hearing about this battle, many wagon trainers looked for an alternative route. The Good Lord Cutoff, which steered clear of any agitated Native Americans along the Snake River. The cutoff skirted the edge of a strange set of geological formations now known as craters of the moon. Yet even at the height of Native American troubles, the majority of the immigrant wagons stayed on the main trail along the southern side of Snake River. The last massacre that had occurred, not the last, but the last we're going to talk about that occurred, was the Bear River Massacre. By the early 1860s, many felt the need to punish the tribes along the trail. Colonel Patrick Connor, stationed in Salt Lake City, was among those who wanted to teach the Native Americans lessons. In January of 1863, Connor and his Californian volunteers marched north to the Bear River. There, Connor's men brutally killed 400 Native American men, women, and children. More Native Americans died at Bear River than any other battle in Western history. The grotesque attempt at genocide did have its intended effort. The trail was safe for the immigrants for a while. But word of the Bear River Massacre and a familiar event in Sand Creek, Colorado, soon spread to tribes across the West. Native Americans had enough, and they were about to begin fighting back. Those were some of the encounters that the Native Americans had with the settlers going west to Oregon on the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail played an important part on Native American culture and the way they lived because they ruined all of their hunting grounds, all of their grazing grounds for their cattle, and messed up their livelihood. Now, this was not all due to the Oregon Trail, but much of it was. I hope you enjoyed our lesson on the Oregon Trail.